So you might know that in Eastern Europe, including Hungary, there is always this kind of what I call a comparison of sufferings. So the country has been overrun by communist dictatorship, and to teach the Holocaust from the point of an educator faces difficulties, because there's always the question of, okay, but what about the victims of communist dictatorships? So we are educators here sitting, so how would you tackle this question?
Well, it's very simple, really. I say the question is a purely artificial question. There is no comparison of suffering. Simply doesn't exist. Anyone who was tortured or was killed by an enemy, by brutality and so on and so forth, it's the same suffering. There's no way, and in fact, you know, it is amoral. It goes against any sense of morality to compare suffering with suffering. And I think that we have to get out of this. Now, comparison between communist dictatorship and Nazi dictatorship is something that is coming up now in Europe. It's a very problematic thing. I can't go into the details because simply we don't have the time for that. But I think you have to be very careful about that. The communist dictatorship in Eastern Europe lasted for 45 years. Especially in the Baltic countries, where the Soviet Union reoccupied the Baltic countries in 1944 and Eastern Poland in 1944, and then, of course, into the next 45 years. So, during that time, tens of thousands of people were exiled, were deported. All these countries were put under a regime. I don't have to tell you. Look, I was in Hungary during the communist regime for a visit. I was invited to the VAR in Budapest, to the Hungarian Academy of Science for a lecture. This was very courageous by the people who were then in charge. Brutal oppression. There's no doubt about it. Was it genocide? No. No, I don't know of any Soviet document that would show that the Soviets intended to annihilate the Hungarian people. They wanted to control it, they wanted to rule it, they wanted to use it. And they were prepared to use any kind of brutality in order to suppress any opposition. But to kill all Hungarians? No. Kill all the Czechs? No. Kill all the Latvians? No. Kill all the Poles? No. Who wanted to kill? I'll tell you who wanted to kill. There is a Nazi plan called Generalplan Ost. Those of you who know German. General Plan East. It was developed between 1941 and 1943. There are several versions of it. They were all approved by Himmler. And in that plan, it says explicitly, they wanted to do away with Poles, Lithuanians, Latvians, Estonians, Ukrainians. As a group. This is exactly what genocide is about. Partly by killing, partly by absorbing them into the German people, Germanization, yeah? And partly by using them for work, for creation of a new Nazi culture in Germany. So the people who wanted genocide, you know, we are talking about intent, not only action, intent, and clear intent, is the Nazi attempt at genocide. So you don't have to be pro-communist to say that there is a vast difference between the brutality of the communist regime and the Nazi regime. The Nazi regime could only be overturned by war, by victory, by military victory. There's no other way. The Soviet Union collapsed of its own because the ideology was a completely useless ideology, did not work, had no relation to reality, because there was vast corruption, because nothing worked in the Soviet Union, because there was a moral collapse in the Soviet Union, because the education didn't work, and so on and so forth. The whole thing collapsed of its own. Nazi Germany would never have collapsed on its own. So the fact that both are totalitarian regimes is true, of course it's true. Who is nicer, Hitler or Stalin? There's no such question. No possibility of answering a question like that. No? But what you have to realize is that there are, with the same kind of brutality, with the same complete disregard for human dignity, you have two different totalitarian regimes. If it had not been the liberation of Eastern Europe by the Red Army, and it was a liberation, there would have been no chance of the East European countries, after a long struggle, freeing themselves from Soviet rule. Because they would have been under Nazi Germany, they wouldn't have existed. Complicated, but I think it's true.